On November 27, 2025, a developer by the name Alexander25 published a mod with one of the most complicated overarching stories I've ever covered on this channel, which is the lore and tragedy behind one of the best dimension horror mods out there, Wonderland.jar. The story of Wonderland is, as of this moment, not entirely finished, and depending on when you view this video, some info relating to the lore and entities, maybe even dimensions, can be either dated or changed. Please keep this in mind whilst I try my best to solve the mod. Some of the things I say are my own theories that I have carefully curated after looking into and playing the mod for myself. It's not an easy story to fully digest, so I hope to make that easier today. So sit back and enjoy as we try to solve the disturbing lore of Wonderland.jar. Like many other mods, including the broken script, Wonderland does have its own timeline of events. However, if we were to jump into the timeline without educating ourselves on some of the entities first, what they represent and how they work, we would be scratching our heads. Therefore, before we jump into the timeline and story, let's talk about the factions present in the lore first. Much like other mods and ARGs, Wonderland has elements of game worlds bleeding into our real world to tell its story. And the characters that directly come from this corrupted or haunted Minecraft are much more biblical in nature rather than leaning into the typical monster that we're used to from other dimension or even dweller mods. Wonderland.jar is by all means, in my eyes at least, a cosmic horror story. Wonderland is an ethereal realm residing within the game of Minecraft where these entities come from. Entities can be split into multiple categories that we will go over, but for now I want you to memorize a name that will be important. Imagonibus Obscurus. This is Latin and roughly translates to dark imagination. But there's a problem. See, my honest read is that Imagonibus looks like either a deliberate, stylized respelling or just a drift from Imagonivorus that ended up sticking as the official name across the Wonderland lore. Either way, the intended sense seems to be something like Dark Image Eater or Obscure Image Devourer, even if the Latin construction itself doesn't fully hold together grammatically. Obscurus, on the other hand, is straightforward, real Latin. It means dark, hidden, or obscure. But if we really wanted to ignore some of the Latin, the real translation could be something else, but let's all agree to disagree and just call them image feeders or imagons. Imagons derives from the true Latin word imago, which just means image, but it's much easier to say. Think of it as a title rather than an accurate translation. Okay, Jesus, so what is Imagonibus Obscurus, or imagons? Imagons are a species of creatures that come from the Wonderlands. They have their hierarchy and, most importantly, have their strengths and weaknesses. Imagons gain their weaknesses and strengths from the image of the form that they take. They are shapeshifters in a way, but more accurately they are imposters, creatures playing a role that they gain strength from. If you don't understand fully yet what I'm talking about, let me put it into more simple explanations by bringing up a very important imagon called the Entity. The reason why the Entity is such a powerful imagon is because it directly takes the role of Satan himself. Since he's playing Satan, he's impossible to defeat, and therefore he has the most control over the Wonderlands. But I also mentioned that Wonderland has biblical references buried within the story, and this is true. As we take a look at what types of imagons there are, we can start to separate them into a few categories. There are fake angels, fake demons, and anomalies. But what makes them only fake, as their threat to people living outside of Minecraft is very real? Well, as we've discussed earlier, they're not actually angels or demons. They are entities impersonating and taking the form of demons and angels. It is not known how or why they choose a certain form, and where they come from besides just being from the Wonderlands, or how they even understand the difference between demons and angels. But listen, let's not dwell on things we don't know and focus on what we do, starting with our first category. Fake demons, or Imagonibus Obscurus Daemonominus, which crudely translates to demon-like image feeders, refers to a category within the imagon structure. Fake demons will be one of the most present creatures we will encounter when playing Wonderland.jar. We can understand more about the demons and distinguish them based on a few key features. First off, unlike angels, demons have 1, 2, or more eyes present on their bodies being completely pitch black. Second, the eye present on them is always a darkened eye with black pupils. Fake demons are also the masterminds behind the tragedy of Wonderland itself. Keynote: Wonderland, the dimensions themselves are considered an anomaly that is semi-alive, but not to the same extent as the Imagons, obviously. Think of Wonderland as the zone from the movie Annihilation. Let me be very clear. Demons are not all omnipotent, save for a few exceptions. Think of the demons as a hierarchy within a hierarchy. Most demons are purely visual indicators for the player to know that they are demons, and will most likely possess a higher health pool or damage. But within the demons, there are a few that are by all means powerful and cosmic in every sense. One of the most important demons we can discuss is the Entity. The Entity is like the broken end from the broken script, the most powerful demon and the one directly responsible for the deaths of many players. As stated earlier, the Entity directly plays the role of Satan. It's the smartest, deadliest, and most cunning out of all the demons. It's able to shapeshift to trick the player into thinking a friendly is close to them. If a player is not within its reach, it will turn invisible, and when the player is close again, it will show itself. In the lore, it's stated that most players died to just witnessing the Entity. When witnessing him for a second time, the player will go insane, and sleep that same night in their real beds in their real homes and have a heart attack mid-sleep, killing the player in the real world. After this has occurred, a print of their soul is trapped in the game forever. This process is known as digitalization. Let me be clear. Their soul does not directly go into the game. Their real body has died in the real world, and their real soul has passed on into the afterlife. However, a copy or print of their soul is made, and that's the thing trapped in the game. Think of it as the consciousness transfer from the game Soma. In that game, you transfer your thoughts to a different body, but the old body is still very much alive, or dead. It's a duplication rather than a transfer, but that's all I'll say about the Entity for now. We'll get back to him later. As a quick side note, I'd like to mention ethereal demons. These are considered young demons, but they are still capable of inflicting harm onto the player and possession. They can be found in the Slip and Catacombs dimension. And the last thing we need to know about the fake demons is their ability to control. Like I said, their power is not limited to the game itself. Besides death, this can also mean taking control of the player's accounts. This can be done without needing to inflict harm or damage the user. We'll return to demons eventually, but for now, our next category are no concrete information can be given about angels and their origins. However, looking at their stats and behavior patterns, we can put together a picture that seems vastly different to the demons. For starters, fake angels is just a category, and the only entity that can be placed within that category are the ethereal angels. Currently, no other entity exists in the mod that can be sorted into that category. Ethereal angels possess a full white body and no eyes to speak of, making them vastly different from the demons. As their name suggests, they are not hostile towards the player. Even if directly harming them, they will not actively seek hostile engagements with the player. In fact, they can positively impact our character, such as giving the player resistance and regeneration, giving the player a gold apple or a diamond, healing the player. What further suggests their neutrality is their health pool. Let me explain. Some demons have a health pool that obviously consists of a number. The entity has a health pool of 666 when pursuing the player, which is considered to be the number of the devil. Angels have a health pool of 777, which on the other hand, 7 is considered to be a lucky number. But what's worth noting is that stated in recovery log _21.txt, we can see a conversation between what we can assume to be a player and somebody else. Angels could be a type of demon that uses the players as proxies in a war between them and the demons. This could make sense as the angels made the crystal block that the eyeless entity takes comfort in. This has been confirmed by the developer. And for our final category, we have For the sake of this video's length, I've merged these two as there is not a huge difference between the two groups. Besides that, most entities consist of former players whose souls have been trapped in the game, and anomalies which seem to have been born from those dimensions they're respectfully found in. All you need to know right now is that entities and anomalies exist, Where we can make sense of them will come from our understanding of the story and what happened to former players. And we can understand anomalies more when we talk about dimensions the mod has. With that being said, let's dive into the players and timeline of events before our player's intervention. Our next segment consists of exploring and researching the Wonderful Gang and its individual players. There are 7 players in total, each having their own personality, backstory, and ways they got stuck in the Wonderland. Going back to when we spoke about Imagonivus Obscurus, these players are classified as entities, and since they are former players, whilst they do take different shapes, unlike their Minecraft skins before they were killed, I would not classify them as Imagons, as Imagons are born to take a form. They are not taking any form despite looking different. Rather, this is what they look like after being tortured by the demons, and the entity specifically. These are not just skins or bloody forms. It is suggested that the way they look depends on what type of suffering the demons inflicted on them. Also, as a disclaimer to anyone sensitive to topics like this, I want to warn you that these players, according to the Wonderland wiki, many of them were not 18 plus when they died, and some were even younger than 15. This is important as we'll get very personal, and some of the details regarding their demise can be alarming. You've been warned. Now, let's look at the timeline regarding the Wonderful Team. The Wonderful Gang consists of 7 members, and they go as followed. MindManLol 954, who I will be calling Your Mind. 1LW No 46, who I will be calling No One. Fate XX092, who I will call Fate. I Love Blocks 4578, who I will be calling Eyeless. Spawnkilla 0123, who I will be calling the Spawn. Richie Dude 2001 will remain Richie Dude. And XX I'm Still Sorrow XX, who is just Sorrow. Due to how many names there are, I want to use their in-game entity names so that there is no more extra confusion. The story takes place in 2014 when a group of friends started a Minecraft server that they played and had fun on. And for a while, everything seemed fine. According to the notes regarding Fate, Fate apparently had the time of his life playing with the others, and he was also into creepypastas like Herobrine. Fate was also friends with 01 Gorshin, who we will get into later, but honestly not much is known about the gang's adventures within the server, besides a few notable sad conflicts. For one, Fate was being bullied by other members of the friend group, which made him resent the others much more. It's also known that he ceased communication with them on Discord and Facebook. Quick note, but we can safely say they played on this server for a while before the demons made themselves known, as the server started in 2014, but Discord launched May 13, 2015. And when they began to use it, it was possibly even later. Also, Richie Dude was, in the same way as Fate, driven away from the members due to his taste in ore blocks, primarily diamond blocks. I'm not sure why they'd not like him for building with diamond blocks. Perhaps he cheated to get them? I'm not so sure. However, things were about to come crashing down on the group, as after a while, Your Mind had spotted the entity for the first time. It's not known what had happened during this encounter, but what happened after is that Your Mind and Fate built a totem on the server. Little did they know that this totem was a beacon directly making the entity stronger with each passing moment. And so, one by one, each member of the group was killed. Before we continue, this is your last warning. Some details regarding what happened to some players are fucked up. And what makes it even more fucked up is that these were kids at the time. And what makes it even worse is that their soul trapped in the game feels pain, the cold, and the agony. When I researched some of the lore, there were times I felt genuinely uncomfortable, disgusted, and just felt incredibly sad for these souls. It's not clear entirely which members died in which order, so let's start with player No One. The details of his death are gruesome, and instead of me typing it out in my script, I would just semi-quote the Wonderland wiki, as they say everything that needs to be said. On the 12th of February, 2014, around 4:58 a.m., he was driven mad by hallucinations induced by the entity and himself. The reason no one speaks backwards is because he incorrectly himself, resulting in his windpipe being crushed and destroyed. Entity No One has two phases, one where he looks like a normal player, resembling the Steve skin, though his face is completely censored, and his other state where he is in an aggressive state and looks a little different. The way his limbs move whilst his body is in motion, compared with the fact that only the upper part of his body is purple, I didn't say it out loud, but we can safely understand fully what happened to this poor kid. I wish I could say it ends there, but sadly it doesn't. As pointed out by the mod creator via Discord messages, no one tried to escape from the entity by taking his own life. However, this wasn't intentional, as no one suffered from mental issues, and the entity made it even worse. The reason he did what he did was because at the time, he was hallucinating. On top of being mentally unwell, the entity, being as evil as he is, made sure to punish him for trying to escape. Therefore, no one is constantly suffocating, not being allowed to die. Fate. Fate, as we know, was one of the people who directly made contact with the entity for the first time, and ultimately led to the downfall of the group and server. His friends interpreted this as him betraying them, but we obviously know that he had no ill intent. Or did he? See, Fate, besides Richie Dude, was one of the members who was being constantly bullied by the other people. The only person who was nice to him was 01 Gorshin. Fate received gifts from him after Fate was expelled from school. The first encounter with the entity is not known, in the sense that we don't know what type of mental trauma that did to them. But whatever happened in that first encounter prompted Fate and your mind to build the entity, a totem, which ultimately just made the demon even more powerful. After this, the gang members were being killed off one by one, including 01 Gorshin, his only friend. Gorshin turned into the... Fate was soon to follow after the demise of his friends, whose souls now residing in the Wonderlands believed it was Fate who sold them out to the entities. In their anger, they tore Fate apart, and the model we see of him in-game resembles the aftermath of his friends getting their hands on him. The story of Fate is truly tragic because, unlike all of the members, his fate was not looking too great leading up to this point. He got expelled from school, his friends bullied him, his only friend died, and the other members blamed him for everything. And sadly, the details regarding our players don't get any better from here. We now move on to the Eyeless entity, or as he was known, I Love Blocks 4578. Eyeless is a testament to how brutal the demons can actually be. As if harming children wasn't bad enough, their goal we can really see is to make the player suffer. Since the mod is heavily inspired by the broken script, we can make a safe guess and just assume that the demons are actually just assholes who enjoy watching people suffer. Much like the void creatures from the broken script, I think it was the Broken End who stated that he killed the players of the broken script for shits and giggles, essentially. But going back to Wonderland. The exact details of his death are not known, only that he died in his sleep, which definitely means he had witnessed the entity twice, and died of a heart attack in his sleep. A quick side note, if I remember correctly, the way the demons can get a print of someone's soul is during their final sleep. They torture the victims via horrific dreams, and the more pain they endure, the more potent the process is, essentially. After dying in his sleep, Eyeless, who at the time still had eyes, wound up in the Brick Halls dimension. In this dimension, he had grown attached to a block, simply called Crystal Block. As I mentioned previously, this crystal block was given to him by the angels. But the reason they made the crystal block is the same reason the Wanderer made the Wanderer feathers, to entice more players to enter the Wonderland. But why? Why would angels want that? Or even the Wanderer, who despite looking like a demon, gives the player gifts and is totally friendly? I assume this leads us back to our revelation that the angel imagons are also in some way malevolent, or better yet have some disregard for the player's well-being. Their gifts, whilst useful to us, are not meant for our comfort, rather they see us as the only way they can wage their war against the demon imagons. The players are just proxies in a much larger confrontation. Okay, but back to the Eyeless. As I mentioned, he was gifted the crystal block after his death. He would stare at the crystal block endlessly. It was his only comfort, and the demons didn't like this. Eyed flesh and the ethereal demons removed his eyes and sewed them shut. Despite this, however, the Eyeless still sees his beloved block, his mind forever faded and gone after the trauma he endured. Richie Dude's fate is largely unknown. Since he's in the Wonderlands, he definitely died at some point, though the details of his death are not known. It's possible he also died in his sleep, since, and I would like to correct myself on a few things, I said that the process of digitalization happens when a player has a heart attack in their sleep. This is true, but I'd like to correct myself and say that this is the most common way a person dies and gets trapped in the Wonderlands. Players, notably Gorshin, died in more gruesome ways. Quote, "We were playing in his world, where there were all sorts of strange buildings, but then I saw something enter the server. It seemed to grab me in a death grip. I screamed, but only I could hear my scream. I was taken to the hospital with broken arms, as if a car had run over them. I didn't survive." So yeah, he died in the hospital, maybe from a heart attack, maybe from the wounds he suffered, I'm not sure. Either way, his broken arms were a result of most likely the entity. Also, if somebody could tell me what a death grip means, I searched it up and it led me to, penile desensitization caused by masturbating with an excessively tight or aggressive grip. Shit, guys, the entity is freaky as hell. Anyway, going back to Richie Dude, like I said, the details of his death are not known, but we'll just say he had a heart attack. However, for a while, he wasn't stuck in one dimension like the other players, namely the eyeless. This isn't something entirely brand new, as we can see Fate, or no one, present in the overworld. Richie Dude can spawn in the overworld, given you have one of his blocks. Speaking of which, let's talk about that. The dimension is where he now roams, eternally, and has a distaste for players' presence there, as he will get aggressive and attempt to kill the player. The vault is not actually comprised of actual diamond and ore blocks. These are false riches he's surrounded himself with. Other than that, there's not much to go off of. I can safely guess that the reason why he's so aggressive with the player is because members of the gang tried to and stole from him, and also resented him for his taste in building blocks. But other than that, he's a player that remains a mystery. Adding to the details of players who suffered gruesome deaths, we have the Spawn. The Spawn is a humanoid entity that resides within the Maze dimension, formerly known as Spawnkilla 0123. His demise is a bit tragic, as we witness someone who almost got away with his life. After the totem was erected in the server, obviously things started to become a bit pear-shaped, and during this time the Spawn witnessed the entity for the first time. Spawn was off-put by the entity and left the server for a while. However, as we know, he suffered from ADHD in the real world, and his curiosity, or maybe his brain just jumping around constantly, he felt the need to rejoin the world, where he unfortunately saw the entity for a second time. He then became maniac, and in his maniac state, fled into the woods, never to be seen again. We do not know how he died, but dark woods paired with someone having a psychotic episode is the perfect recipe for disaster. So you wouldn't be crazy to assume he died of natural causes when in the woods. It is not known if his body was found or what state it was found in, since the state of the person's body and how it died in the real world can reflect the in-game entities model. We can maybe guess what happened to him. He's a long, lanky figure with a dark grin permanently etched into his face. This smile can obviously be interpreted as him most likely dying with that same smile, due to him losing his mind after witnessing the entity twice. However, what puzzled me a bit are the few pixels on his arms. These are tendrils. Tendrils most commonly appear on plants, and they are used as support for the plant to reach sunnier places without needing to grow thick stems. While this observation is interesting, I for one can't really come up with a conclusion. Besides this, the Spawn can be seen on all fours, crawling towards the player when they're chasing them. His laugh can be heard all the while. It seems that after going into the woods, being surrounded by the trees and plant life, the woods quite literally consumed him, and a part of him directly resembles what we see in plant and animal life. Not much is known about Sorrow, or how he died. He is a passive entity and can be seen in a few poses, such as one where he is standing idle in a crying position. He seemed to have been a kind and emotional person in the real world. Him and Your Mind were and still are on good terms after the incident. After Your Mind broke his keyboard, Sorrow bought him a new one, showing his thoughtfulness. He most likely tried to run from the events but was unsuccessful, and ultimately died. Still crying, still full of sorrow. Your Mind is a former player who resembles the build of Steve, with black and white patterns covering his entire body. He is a former player who is hostile towards the player even though he has full consciousness regarding the incident. He was the one who met the entity for the first time with player Fate. After building the totem, the entity's influence grew, and the players died one by one. The blame ultimately fell on Fate, who was attacked and mauled by the other players. It's rumored that your mind was the last player to die at the hands of the demons, but this soul-crushing weight of knowing that all your friends are dead drove him to insanity more than he already was. See, I mentioned previously that your mind broke his keyboard on 2 occasions and sorrow bought him new ones. This is because he suffered from schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, and severe intrusive thoughts. After the entity dealt with the other group members, your mind developed post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and there he was, left with nothing but his thoughts. However, like we saw with the eyeless, this wasn't enough for the demons. See, the entity appeared in his dreams, but didn't kill him quite yet, instead weaponizing his mental disorders against him, and ultimately using a demon called Wondertree to kill him. It's not known how he died specifically, but it was probably in his dream, most likely due to a heart attack. After being transported to the Wonderlands, he woke up in a dimension directly called Torture, where he later escaped from and found himself in the dimension Answer, afraid to be seen as a monster like the entity by his friends. And that wraps up our segment of the Wonderful Gang. As I was writing the script, I noticed how much this story resembled the Broken Script story directly. A group of friends who uncover something in their world, things get weirder, someone betrays them, and now they all hate that person whilst in eternal purgatory. Despite the obvious inspiration, it's an interesting story to uncover, albeit very disturbing in some cases, as we'll see soon. And yeah, somehow it does get much worse than this. But let's move on to our next group, as there are 2 in the story. We looked at the Wonderful Gang, but now come... The Once Was group is also a friend group similar to the Wonderful Gang. The key difference between the 2 is that Once Was a group of players playing on some sort of anarchy server, whilst Wonderful group played on what we can most likely assume to be an SMP. Not that anarchy servers are not technically SMPs, but the distinction is clearly made in the lore. By the way, I know that the Once Was group has found footage-esque videos on their YouTube channel. However, in this video I want to focus on only the details of the mod itself. Piecing together these videos, whilst it might be cool, we already know what happened to them. My sole purpose right now is so that the next time you play Wonderland, you know exactly what each thing is and who it is and what their motivations are. With that being said, let's get into the members. Once Was had 8 members, unlike the 7 in the Wonderful group. Side note, Once Was plays on an anarchy server after the Wonderful Gang have already died. It is unknown how the entity and Wonderland find their victims and how they move server to server. We do know, however, that Minecraft is the perfect vessel for them to commit atrocities, as it's a sandbox where you can do anything and everything. Once Was is comprised out of the following members: XX Siren 39XX, who I will call the Siren, or Siren, Carrier of Swords, or the Carrier, Ruler of the Skins, or Skinless, Jacob 05, or just Jacob, Mastaman, who will continue to be Mastaman, Yuso Helpless 2, or the Helpless, Keeper of Bones, who will stay Keeper of Bones, and Was Once Alone, or Was Once. That's a lot of members, so let's see how these poor souls met their untimely demise. The Once Was gang are not so important in my eyes. Yes, they also turn into entities, and the player has to avoid them in the Wonderland mod, thus making them relevant to the story. However, I just feel like this group is more of a filler than anything else. The most important story beats happened with the Wonderful Gang, their first encounter with the entity, the construction of the totem, and everything in between. Whilst Once Was members do have lore to them, there are some who genuinely have no backstory or are left completely vague because they're just kinda filler characters. Their lore is only there in the first place to give the mod creator a reason to put specific entities into the game. Now that being said, I appreciate what little we do have about them. Some descriptions of certain players might be little to none, but I can't really do much about that. But enough yapping, let's take a look at the roster we're dealing with. Our story of the gang takes place in 2016, a whole 2 years after the Wonderful Gang and their first contact with the demons. This was a tight-knit group of players, as we can tell by the builds they made, that can be found in dimensions scattered across Wonderland. Notably, remnants of a mega base they intended to build, which we can see on the What Once Was and Remembrance dimensions. These dimensions serve as slices of their actual Minecraft world, which, much like the players who built them, are in permanent limbo. Other than that, not much is known about the Once Was gang's contact with the entity or demons in general, but looking at the archived OurWorld.mov video, we can see that the server slowly got weirder and weirder until the entity made itself known. After it did, the Carrier was the first one to perish. The carrier, as seen in the OurWorld.mov video, was with the members when things started to go incredibly weird. It was during this time when he was transported to the torture dimension and got both of his arms ripped off. Now this raises a few questions for obvious reasons. This was all happening in real time, and it's not clear if he got his arms ripped off in the real life or if it was his character's arms. See, I assume that whilst the entity does have control over harming players in the real world, it was usually through psychological means and heart attacks. But we have seen one member in particular who seemed to have suffered injuries in real time, potentially just like the carrier. I'm of course talking about 01 Gorshin. Fate saw the entity mangle his body in real time before being promptly sent to the hospital, before he eventually died. I assume that after he died in the hospital, the digitalization process happened there. Now, with the carrier, the details are obviously more vague. We don't know the exact timeline of events that happened while he was dying. So yeah, let's just say he got his arms ripped off, succumbed to his injuries, and then was digitalized into the Wonderlands. Now, Carrier is not an actively hostile entity. He knows full well what happened and doesn't want to hurt the player. However, he is possessed, probably by an ethereal demon, though this is not confirmed. He doesn't want to hurt the player, but he can't help himself. This is further confirmed by the fact that if you listen carefully to the noises he makes when aggroing the player, you can vaguely hear, "Save me," "Help me," and "Please." Okay, I want to warn you, the next bit of details are extremely fucked up. If you're sensitive to harm of a child, this video is already your worst nightmare, but I'm sorry to say things only get worse with the helpless. So please, if you don't want to hear the fucked up shit I'm going to talk about, skip to the next entity. Since you're still here, I assume you have problems or have morbid curiosity the same way I do. So let's get into the one entity I really didn't want to talk about. Helpless is the younger brother of Jacob 05, a member of the Once Was group. Helpless is also the youngest out of the members, being only 9 years old when he met a very unfortunate end to his young life. Thankfully, the details of his death are not mentioned, but looking at his character model, I think that's probably for the better. After an unknown series of events, most likely after witnessing the entity for a second time, Helpless was split in half horizontally, and to make things worse, his legs were broken and skinned. After this, he became the Helpless. What makes his death even worse is that we know players feel everything regarding their body, proof of which I'd like to remind you is no one, who is still suffocating from his injuries, which I won't repeat. Therefore, we can only imagine what Helpless went through before completing his transition into the Wonderland. I'd be lying if I said that that was the end. There are a few book and quill notes we can find throughout the Wonderland that give us a bit of insight on what the players are feeling and their personalities. Unfortunately, we can find one that Helpless wrote, and it is truly heartbreaking. Page 1 to page 100 goes as follows. I just miss and mom, dad. I miss Jacob and my dog Bubba. I want to go home, please. I just want to wake up. Is this what hell looks like? I'm so tired. I feel so helpless. I can't see. I can't feel my arms. Mama, I'm please scared. I can't hear anything. I can only feel the cold, smooth floor against what once was my feet. I can't hold this fear inside me anymore. I feel like I'm going to explode. I just want to be held one last time. Is that really too much to ask for? To make things worse, if we look at this line a little closer, we understand a disturbing reality. He is literally about to explode from the fear and pain building up inside of him. If the player hurts the Helpless, or if he comes in contact with the player, he explodes. And that's where I'll end this segment about the Helpless. He's the most tragic entity with the most disturbing backstory in the Wonderland. He was an innocent kid who just wanted to play with his friends and his older brother Jacob when his young life was cut all too short. After traumatizing you, it only makes sense we look towards the big brother next. Jacob 05's fate is largely unknown, but there is a silver lining. Jacob 05 is the only member of the Once Was group who survived the Wonderland incident. The reason for this is because he doesn't have horror movie brain, and when shit started to get weird, he just left the server and never came back. He knows absolutely nothing about the entity since he quit playing on the server before the entity's arrival. What his reaction was and how he processed the passing of his younger brother remains unknown, which is probably for the better. But we can assume he moved on and continued to live a normal life, as he is currently 20 years old, and he was 17 when the Wonderland events happened, even though the server started in 2016 and it's 2026 now. But whatever, there are so many plot holes like this in Wonderland, like how you can see the players playing in 2016, but the Minecraft version says 1.20.1, so I won't look into it that much. There are some other details regarding Jacob on Wonderland Wiki, like, Jacob is gay. Okay, Jacob has a fursona, which is an orange cat. Thank you, Cloudy, for confirming this incredibly important and relevant information. Godspeed. Skinless, as we know already, played on the same server as the Once Was gang. Not much information is known about him, and I'm not going to waste your time theorizing and stretching this video out with useless information, as all we need to know about him is in his name and what he looks like. At an unknown point in time, Skinless had an encounter with the entity and was quite literally stripped of his skin. It's unknown if this was also a real-time inflicted injury, or if his digitalized self was skinned. He is one of the few passive entities that still has full control over his actions. He will deliberately run towards the player in an attempt to crash their game, hopefully shielding the player away from encountering the entity. His brother was also a member of the Once Was gang, who we know as Keeper of Bones. Keeper of Bones is a character that remains fully shrouded in mystery. It's not known how he died, and he does not appear as an entity in any of the Wonderland files. All we know is that he might have met a similar fate to his brother, Skinless, and played during the same time as the Once Was gang. Other than that, there's nothing to go off of. Mastaman is a character we also don't know anything about, and also doesn't have an in-game entity despite being a victim of the entity. According to the wiki, the entity didn't have any ideas with Mastaman, so it just simply killed him without digitalizing Mastaman. In a morbid way, he's one of the lucky ones. His soul is presumably able to move on to the afterlife without a copy of him suffering in eternal hell. Was Once is a humanoid entity resembling a deformed Alex skin. This is because Once Was is the only canonical female in the Wonderland former player list. After being killed by the entity, Was Once, as we can see on her in-game skin, was blinded and was turned into whatever she is now. We can see blood on her character showing signs of slash trauma inflicted on her body, and blindness due to the hole in her face. Also, I'm not sure if this is a part of her clothing or if there's a gash in her stomach. She's a person who is afraid to be alone and will desperately try to get close to the player, unaware that this hurts them. Other than that, there's really not much to go off of. Sorry for being a broken record, but I can say once again that there's not much known about Siren, and what exactly happened to him before and during his digitalization. All we know once again is that he played during the same time as the Once Was clan did. From what I can see, Siren has no visible legs to speak of, most likely showing that the entity ripped them off during his digitalization process, much like the Helpless and other entities. He doesn't want to hurt the player, or at least it's not what he would want, but he's eternally starved and hungry. Besides what we know, Jacob and Siren were close friends, supporting each other until the very end. However, Jacob survived, and Siren is now alone, wandering the Wonderlands forever. And with that, this wraps up our analysis of the Once Was gang. Sadly, only a few members have concrete information about them, unless I missed some text or clues within the game, which given how dogshit of a detective I am, I probably did. But look, let me remind you that these videos are purely me injecting my own theories into the story that makes the most sense, and making a video in a timeline that is easy to understand as a viewer, or at least I try. We're very close to finishing our analysis of the Wonderland lore, but before we do, there are still multiple entities that haven't been mentioned yet, so let's go over them. This section focuses on all the entities in the game. This means we'll go over demons, former players, and anomalies, all mixed into one big section of the video. Let's start by wrapping up our former players, as there are some who we haven't discussed in great detail yet. As the name suggests, this is just a someone, a random person, or rather a demon. As we discussed in the beginning of the video, demons can kill people, but can also take over accounts. Someone and somebody are demons taking over Minecraft accounts. What happened to the user of those accounts are not known. Also, to be clear, someone and somebody are two different entities, Someone is a demon wearing the Steve skin, and somebody wears the Alex skin, though their behaviors do not vary based on skin. You may recognize this name, and that's because we've discussed this character briefly. Gorshin was friends with Fate, meaning he played during the same time as the Wonderful Gang. Him and Fate were very close friends. Gorshin supported Fate with his mental and social problems. They played together, gave each other gifts, and were just generally good friends with each other. In fact, they knew each other since childhood, meaning they were also friends IRL. However, after the entity somehow got his hands on Gorshin and turned him into the Pillar, a tall black box that can be opened, revealing a mangled, bloody Steve inside, Gorshin blames Fate for his state in the Wonderland, stating it's all his fault. Eye is a black humanoid figure with only one eye present on its head. It will stalk and chase the player, teleporting them to the torture dimension. Same as the Eye, though it will always chase the player given the chance. Lore-wise, he embodies a small fraction of the power the entity himself possesses, meaning he can hurt players through their game world, but an occurrence like this has not yet been documented. Vessel is a golem of sorts and can be possessed by multiple ethereal demons. It will only chase the player if the player does not make direct eye contact with it. Little is known about this humanoid entity, but as stated previously, we know that he's also responsible for removing the eyes from the player eyeless, along with the help of some ethereal demons. Wonder Tree is not actually a tree, rather it's a reference to the similarities it shares between it and the branches of a tree. This is because Wonder Tree is an amalgamation of multiple demons. It's a hive mind hell-bent on killing, which paired with it being extremely powerful is not good news for any player that falls in its path. Notable fatalities include the death of Your Mind. The Wonder Tree killed him directly. Besides him though, there's not much to go on. Big ball, not friendly, stay away. It's a fucking fish, dude, what do you want me to say? The Wanderer is a tall, slender figure that roams the Wonderlands, but can even be spotted in the overworld. It is one of the few entities that is passive, and as stated previously, will also offer the player gifts, most commonly the Wonder Feather. The feather was made by the Wanderer, and using it you can craft the Ethereal Pillow, which once used on a bed can transport you to the Wonderlands directly. Other than that, his purpose or what he wants is not yet known. Therefore, I just kinda interpret him as an entity born from the Wonderland, passively observing and learning, kinda like a curious animal. Avoid this piece of shit at all costs, and don't look at it. If you do, it will force your gaze at it whilst dealing damage to the player, even if you're in creative mode. Lore-wise, it's unknown what his part is in the story of Wonderland, so just avoid him if you can. Woodseeker is not fully sentient, and like most anomalies doesn't carry any lore relevancy with him. He can spawn in the Endless House dimension and pursue the player. He's very fragile and doesn't really do much besides just chase you down and deal great damage. But because he's a big motherfucker, he can't actually go through doors, so he'll just stand there and look at you. Remember Me is an interesting anomaly in the Wonderland universe. Despite having a humanoid appearance, he is most definitely not a former player. He was born in the Wonderlands, but didn't have any physical form. He then encountered the player No One, and that's all that he knew and remembered, so it tried to replicate No One's form, succeeding in some areas and failing in other areas. Besides that, Remember Me is a hostile entity. It doesn't know what players are, so I assume it only attacks in confusion, slowly flying towards the player and dealing heavy damage. However, it's an easy mob to kill using vanilla Minecraft methods, or more than enough to take it down. This is most likely due to what I said earlier in the video. Imagons take forms and images of other things which grant them strengths and weaknesses. Since it took the form of a player, traditional methods are enough to kill him. And that's all. I said I was going to go over the individual dimensions that Wonderland.jar has to offer. However, I find that going over every dimension is kind of pointless, as most of the information that is relevant to this video has already been discussed in previous sections of the video. It's mostly information about what structures can be found within them, and if you're lucky you can find that some of them are based off structures of actual group members made in their own world. But we already knew that. The point of this video was to offer a semi-coherent timeline, so that when you go into the mod and play Wonderland for yourself, You won't be scratching your head when you come face to face with some of the entities. Overall, I think Wonderland has a great, albeit incredibly dark story that, I won't lie, can be edgy sometimes, but I'm willing to look past that since the mod itself is built incredibly well. If I could offer one thing as feedback to the mod creators if they're watching this, I wish Wonderland had a purpose, a beginning and end. And yeah, it technically does, but I wish the story was more linear in some ways, and that it had a clear end goal, like being able to somehow defeat the entity and getting a reward for that, or somehow freeing all the lost souls found in the mod, where you could achieve a good or bad ending depending on what you do. Other mods have done this, and it's what makes Dimension Horror mods so great. A good example is something like Beyond the Skybox mod. I love that mod's linear storytelling, and it did so many things like actual in-game cutscenes. For a story like Wonderland, one can only imagine how fucking cool that would be. But before we end our journey, I'd like to go over a few details I missed whilst making this video, and it could help add an extra layer of understanding when you explore the Wonderlands for yourself. Starting off, crosses can be found in the mod to exorcise the demons. Though not all of them can be defeated, some demons just slow down. Crosses are not meant as a permanent solution. Instead, it's the mod giving you ways to escape dimensions and fight back against the demons, since in 90% of cases, your traditional weapons won't work. When playing Wonderland.jar, you can come across invisible followers. If you hear footsteps but don't see anybody, press F3 plus B to show hitboxes. You'll see an invisible entity's hitbox approaching you or standing not far from you. It's largely unknown what their purpose is, but it's confirmed by the developer himself that it's the invisible followers that place random structures across the overworld. Why they do this is not known. The entity can affect the real world, obviously, but not just limited to the player's psyche. It can induce hallucinations, but can also move real-life objects around in the player's real world like a poltergeist. This adds on to my thought process of this being a cosmic horror mod. I might have left some details out, feel free to scold me in the comments section, but for now that's it. And there you have it, that's the complete lore of Wonderland.jar from beginning to end. I'm not sure if there will be a sequel to this mod in the future or what else the mod creator is working on, but I had a lot of fun making this video and writing this script. This was a doozy of a video, but as you'll come to see within a month or two, the next investigation video will be the biggest and craziest video I make, so look out for that one. With that being said, if you made it this far, I'd like to thank you so much for taking your time to watch this video. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more, definitely be sure to hit subscribe. It lets me know you enjoy these videos and that I should make more. Next video, I will focus on a mod I'm so very excited to return to. Thank you again, and I'll see you all very soon.